Today we're going to be talking about why Mr. Robinson has not honoured his word by failing to publish a documentary called Shalom, purportedly about his friend, despite it being over 8 months past the initial release date. So what's going on here? Mr. Robinson wants us to believe Mr. Yisrael Shalom messaged him before passing away, and Mr. Robinson is honour bound now to publish the documentary about his supposed close mate.
No, I'm not. But I don't like being inactive. So in that 6 to 8 weeks from my court case, I thought I'd publish my other documentary, which is about a British man called Yisrael Shalom.
This was just before the general election in December 2019.
Now this documentary tells his story, because one of the last people he messaged before he died was me, relying on me as a friend to tell his story and highlight.
In the same video in December 2019, Robinson was claiming he will publish blockbuster documentaries, plural, 4 of them in fact, in the next 12 months. That was a tall claim, right?
So in the next 12 months, whilst you're moaning about me, in the next 12 months, I'm going to publish 4 blockbuster documentaries, okay? That are going to bring more people.
This is a hefty claim from Mr. Robinson. That would be an impossible order for the likes of Michael Moore, Steven Spielberg and Louis Theroux. But for the fantasist and grifter Mr. Robinson, it's all a walk in the park. No bother at all for him, no skin off his nose, he can do it, no bother. Well, it's been over 8 months now, and he has not only not delivered these so-called blockbuster documentaries, but he has not even published the documentary about his so-called mate, Mr. Shalom, even though he was set to publish it in December 2019 before the general election to try and get some mainstream media buzz and publicity and harm Corbyn's chances of election for his paymasters.
And another thing, I was trying to get this documentary out before Wednesday, before the election. It's going to be impossible. We can't get it edited quick enough, and I don't want to take any of the it's going to be a powerful story, and I owe it to Yisrael, I owe it to his family who have been working with us on this documentary now, to tell the story to its full potential.
By all accounts, the word soon in Mr. Robinson's book is a period of time longer than 9 months, and still counting. If you ask me, Mr. Robinson has either been told by the family of Mr. Shalom to stop using Mr. Shalom for his agenda and grift, and or he's realised discrepancies and problems with Mr. Shalom's narratives, which to be honest they do seem difficult to believe if you go away and read what he's alleged, and or Mr. Robinson is worried about putting out the Shalom documentary. He's worried about a backlash from some of his fans, as they don't really like the idea that he spent their donation money on the Shalom documentary. Mr. Robinson is a grifter and a chancer. He's not very professional in outlook. Mrs. Lauren Southern is a professional documentary producer, and she's announced plans to make a new documentary. Seeing as she's professional, we actually expect a documentary from her. Her new documentary is entitled Crossfire, and she has a professional trailer out for it now. Lastly, and most importantly, the former leader of UKIP, Gerard Batten, polled Twitter, largely his followers I'd imagine. They were given the cloak of anonymity, and as Oscar Wilde's saying goes, man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give a man a mask and he will tell you the truth. It looks like the anonymity of a Twitter poll was a metaphorical mask, and Mr. Batten was in for a rude awakening. It turns out 60% of respondents believed only indigenous people can identify as English, not non-indigenous people such as Asians and Africans. Do note, this poll was addressed to his crowd, his Twitter following, so it may well be even more in favour of ethno-nationalism. Who knows? The fact remains this poll backs up the We Were Never Asked survey results, and it's another strong indication that most Brits have components of ethno-nationalism at heart, and if the threat of punitive measures in the form of a backlash by society and the establishment was lifted, many more Brits would openly state their ethno-nationalist sentiments. How many more? Well, it could just be 60% of the population, as Mr Batten's poll results indicate. It's safe to say there's a number of folks who see English as an ethnic group, Mr Batten, just like your parents' generation did. I posit to Mr Batten, if he polled his parents' generation, the result would have been 90% plus. If he polled his grandparents' generation, the result would have been 100% or thereabouts. Now the question here is, where does this truth and bombshell leave Mr Batten? It's difficult for him to change direction given his public civic nationalist sentiment and his apparent disappointment in finding out what British people truly believe via his survey. But who knows? Maybe, just maybe, he or other members of the establishment will advocate for the 60% in the future.